Well, I'd like to welcome you, Scott, Chief Freitag, to Living a Good Life. And I want to thank you for your willingness to join us today.
Well, I thank you for the invitation. We always appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
Great. Us likewise. We have a long partnership in the community, and we've started this podcast, Living a Good Life, and kind of the backdrop for you so you can orient yourself today is living a good life allows everybody to kind of fill in the missing pieces.
Right.
So you could be a young person just leaving mom and dad's house for the first time and you're out on your own and you want to live a good life. You could be a young family with your kids looking for that starter home and having jobs and working, and the meaning of a good life for you is different. Or you could be retired.
Sure.
And you have a completely different definition. And this podcast is kind of discussing what goes into the design of a community.
Okay.
And it's not just bricks and mortar.
No.
There's a lot to it, but what goes into design that makes a community a place where people can live a good life?
Okay.
And so we touch all kinds of topics, and today we have the chief of Central Yavapai Fire District with us, and we think it's an important ingredient in design of a community and part of living a good life. And so thank you for being here.
Well, I really appreciate it. Central Yavapai Fire combined with Chino, so now we're Central Arizona Fire Medical Authority. So we're building. We have quite the footprint in the community, and we serve a lot of people. And our intent is to build a good culture within our organization, because if you have a good culture in the organization, you provide better services in the community.
Yeah. Before we launch into all of that, I want our viewers and listeners to really understand who CAFMA is.
Okay.
Because they're the fire department, and like when we describe Prescott Valley a lot of times to development partners coming in and they're trying to understand, and we're like, well, you realize Prescott Valley doesn't have its own fire department like Prescott does. Prescott has Prescott Fire. Prescott Valley contracts with CAFMA, and it's a different relationship. So can you give us a 30-second or minute elevator pitch on who is CAFMA, what is CAFMA?
So the reason that Prescott Valley does not have their own fire department is because as the town developed, it grew over time, and it was serviced by a fire district because there's nobody here prior to the incorporation of the town to serve. So the fire district kind of grew with Prescott Valley and then grew outside of Prescott Valley to serve other areas of unincorporated county. So as Prescott Valley annexed and grew, it was more in the central Yavapai area, same thing on the Chino Valley side. And so we provide emergency services for 369 square miles of Yavapai County. We're the largest emergency response agency in the area, and we cover everything from EMS to smoke detector calls.
So put that in context, 360 miles. Is that what you said, square miles?
369 square miles.
So 369 square miles. How many square miles does Prescott Fire
46.
cover? So 46 versus, so how do you, give us an idea of how do you manage that from an organizational standpoint when you have so much land, and people will say, well, a lot of it's empty, which is true, but it's filling up.
It is, quickly.
As we look out there every 5 years, you see a lot more rooftops in unincorporated areas. So how do you manage that from an organizational perspective?
So we have 165 total employees, and we run out of 10 full-time fire stations. And there's only 2 out of the 10 that aren't extremely busy, right? There's 2 slower stations. The other 8 are very busy because, as you said, it continues to grow. We also have other resources in a fleet facility, a warehouse facility that provides for all the services that we need to get equipment and supplies to the different stations and different buildings that we have. We run a purchasing consortium because it cuts our costs down, and we have about 20 other fire districts that purchase through us, as well as school districts because janitorial supplies and office supplies. We have a tech services facility because we need to be able to communicate, and there aren't a lot of options up here for companies that can provide that service. So we provide the service. We actually contract with Sheriff's Department and Prescott Valley PD to maintain their radio systems. And then we have a training facility that 15 acres, it's regional. Both our law enforcement partners and our fire partners use that facility. And then we have a fleet facility where we not only fix our own equipment, but we're warranty repair for that. So for the types of vehicles we drive. So the Rosenbauer fire engines, we have the Pierce engines. We're going to get, we are the warranty repair facility for those. Great thing about that is if one of our vehicles breaks under warranty, we get paid to fix our own equipment by an outside third party. So that's good. Okay. But trying to keep all of that together, and the reason I went through all of those is because we are spread out over 369 square miles. And as you talk about building a good life and building a culture and an organization, trying to bring people together when you have so many satellite locations and you have multiple different shifts and people working and different personalities can be a challenge. And so one of the ways that we try to communicate, because I think we can agree, any organization you go into, you ask them what's their main problem, and they're going to say communications, right?
Fundamental.
So when I came here, I started out, and it's really kind of a pain, but I do it anyways. Every week I send out a newsletter that informs the entire organization of what's happening, what are we doing, and I put my calendar in it so everybody knows where I'm at. And that goes out to about 400 people outside of the organization as well. Now we're finding that people don't like to do things like read. So I was trying to put pictures in to keep people's attention. So we started a podcast similar to this, where we can try to communicate in another way, both on our YouTube channel and other podcast platforms, to get information out. And because it's public, the public can learn more about what we're doing as well. And the best feedback we've ever had on the podcast is when we bring in some of our personnel and introduce them to the community. It's amazing. Or if we have a picture of a firefighter with a dog or an owl or something.
Makes them human.
Right, it does.
Right? I mean, if you think of CAFMA, CAFMA Fire Department, they put out fires, they go to accidents, but what you described there was, I don't even think you mentioned the word fire or accident of all the things that you do.
No.
I mean, there's all these, a management company, a tax company, a purchasing company, all these different things that you're doing as an organization in our community.
Right.
That goes into the design of our community, because you're trying to lower costs for the school districts.
Absolutely.
And yourself.
Yep.
Which those two are taxpayer dollars, so keep the taxpayers' purse lower.
Right.
The technology on communication, essential for you, but also for our sheriff and police, then you're helping to integrate all that.
Yes.
So that goes into our safety and response times.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about, and I don't see it's one's better than the other, that they're just different and they work for each community.
Okay.
But your structure and its relationship to Prescott Valley,
okay,
as a fire department, fire agency, versus Prescott owning their own, because you got Prescott Fire.
Right.
And I see them, most cities have their own, right? You got Phoenix Fire, Tempe Fire, and we don't. We have the regional fire as part of Prescott Valley. So explain a little bit how those two organizations work differently, just so our viewers understand they're both good and they both have a place. Sure. And just so I want them to understand there is a difference and they both can work. And how you guys, I think you guys also work together.
We do. We work
and have a great
together.
relationship with Prescott Fire. So I want our viewers to know that it's not a competition either.
So let's start with the funding difference between a municipal fire department and a fire district fire authority, which is what we are. So Prescott Fire Department, the majority of their budget comes from sales tax generated within the city. The upside of that is a lot of people drive through Prescott Valley and go into Prescott, and they spend time there because there's a lot to see and visit. And so everyone who comes in who doesn't live in the city of Prescott, that shops, stays, eats in the city, and calls 911 has actually helped pay for those services. So that's a great place to be, because now you have a little more access to dollars, not just from one pot of money, right?
Okay.
On the fire district side, and this always, people are not thrilled about this when I say it, but we are solely property tax based. We get no sales tax whatsoever. It's all property tax. The downside to that is if somebody travels through Prescott Valley, let's say from Phoenix, and they stay in Prescott Valley, they shop, they eat, they stay at a hotel, and they call 911, you're paying that bill, they're not. Because none of the monies that they spend actually come to the fire district because of the funding structure. So that's how we're a little bit different there. Most of the cities that you talked about, well, they incorporated it as cities. They incorporated it at a time where they also started a fire department to service the area because they were more urban centers. In large areas of counties where they weren't urban centers, they had fire districts because it's the only way to provide service. And then as towns and cities grew, it didn't make financial sense for that city to invest all of those dollars in building duplicate stations, duplicate equipment, and adding more personnel. So that's how they're different. And that's how the relationship between us and Prescott Valley is slightly different. The good thing is we have a great partnership with Prescott Valley. The new town manager, Gilbert Davidson, and I just had lunch yesterday. We try to do that on a regular basis. We're actually talking about developing some leadership programs together that fire personnel and Town of Prescott Valley personnel would attend jointly to continue to build that healthy relationship and partnership. As far as the city of Prescott, we have what's called automatic aid. So there's no visible boundary as far as when somebody calls 911. It's a closest unit response, and it doesn't matter what the side of the engine says or the back of the jacket. We also train together on a regular basis. So we have quarterly training where one of our engines will go to their training ground and one of their engines will come to our training ground, and we'll work together. We have a regional hazardous materials team because each entity does not need its own hazmat team. We don't run enough hazmat calls. And if we pool the resources, it drives the cost of the program down for each side. We have a regional rescue team, and Chief Dura, the new chief of Prescott Fire, him and I spoke last night. And on the rescue side, we're talking about, hey, how can we do more together? Instead of both of us looking at our own rescue engines, is there a way that we can diversify the equipment, really have that regional concept, have smaller, more specific or specialized vehicles and in each area that can respond? It saves everybody money.
Makes sense.
Right.
Run it like a business.
And that's exactly what we try to do with CAFMA is run that like a business. Because I would be considered more like a town manager in the position I'm in.
Okay.
I report to an elected board, elected at large from the communities that we serve. And so I have a lot of flexibility in what I can do within my organization. And that for me is great because that means I get the opportunity to really help build the culture and set the example for what we want to be and what we want to see as an organization and for those we serve.
That's great. Well, let's build on that culture statement because in our organization, we spent the last 4 or 5 years really focused on who are we as an organization, what's our mission, what's really our purpose, and a lot of people, it's to build buildings or to make money, and it's like those are byproducts of our purpose.
Sure.
But in that process, I'm always looking for new things to learn. I'm always bringing stuff to our group, our team, to study together. We meet every week for an hour, and we talk about something. Right. It could be a book we're reading, it could be an article, it could be a video. I mean, we've touched philosophy, we've touched business books, we've touched all kinds of books. So with that, I understand that you love to learn.
I do.
I understand that you have your own podcast, you just mentioned it, CAFMA Connect. And you're really big, as you just said, on culture.
Yes.
So share with me, let's compare notes here a little bit. What are you doing on the culture front, and how are you growing it and developing it inside of an organization that's spread over 369 square miles? So
when we came together as CAFMA, the first thing we did was we got rid of the mission statement for Chino Valley and the one for CYFD, and we said, hey, we're a new organization. We need to work together to develop what's our purpose, what's our vision for the future, what's our philosophy, identify our core values. And we set up 2 separate committees to work on that with people both inside and outside the organization were invited to participate because we feel that we are a community organization. That's the way we should be. And so we spent probably 6 months defining that. And then when we were done, A lot of organizations, let me say this real quick, a lot of organizations will do that. They'll put a sign on the wall, and then that's the last time they'll talk about it. So what we did was we took all of the information from those meetings and we created, you can go to our website and download this, a document called the CAFMA Compass. And our compass serves as our guide. So we kept the mission statement, the vision statement, and our values short so that people could remember them. And then we created this document so that people can refer back to it and get more in depth. What does this mean to us? What does it really mean? I created it, it's only 7 pages long because we're firefighters and we have very short attention spans. But it gets to the heart of who we are and what we want to be. And so that's great. Now we have this document. The last page are my expectations of everyone in the organization, including the elected officials who are technically my bosses. Very simple, very short. But now you have to instill that in the culture of the organization. Mm-hmm. You have to promote that on a regular basis. So it's not a wallpaper, it means something. And after I've been here 8.5 years, I can say that I've now seen when somebody has you hate to talk about discipline, but if somebody has a discipline that comes across my desk and I see it, what I see written in there is not just a policy or an SOG that somebody violated. The person writing the disciplinary report refers to the compass. You didn't just, violating these things are one thing, but you violated what we said we believe in.
One of our core values.
Right. And so it's been fun to drive that, but we hit it all the time. And in the newsletter that I write, if I'm reading a book, like right now I'm reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And
great book.
It is a fantastic read so far. And so in an upcoming newsletter, you'll see that the article that I write is philosophical, based on parts of that book. Because I want to share it with people and I want to lead them to, hey, get excited about this and go read this book.
Yeah, and I think she does a great job of addressing shame.
Yes.
And how, without even realizing it, people use shame so much to shame people into decisions and shame people into doing things that you want them to do.
Right.
Or, and we get it a lot. We read that book and watched a video on her on that, and it was interesting because we were going through a public process of zoning.
Okay.
And to then go back to the group and say, did you see the shame last night? I mean, it's amazing how the public comes at you and how, and it's not, they don't mean to, right? It's just, we don't know until somebody like Brene Brown writes a book and says, here's what you're doing. You don't even realize it, but it's amazing how powerful shaming people can be in a negative way.
It really is. And the other part that, what I like about Dare to Read is talking about vulnerability. Because if you want to try to, if you want people to follow you, there has to be a sense of humility about you. An ability to say, I screwed that up.
Yeah.
And before I was reading her book, my approach was I would use myself as an example in classes of, hey, I made this mistake. Or if we were talking to our managers or captains or whomever, here's where I screwed this up. This is my fault, I own it. And there was a fire incident that I went on. I try not to respond too much anymore. But I come from Missouri. We had this thing called water everywhere and fire hydrants. And so I had never in my life responded to a call where there wasn't one. And so when the engine got on scene, I told him to hit the fire with a deck gun. The battalion chief said, Chief, we don't have any water. I'm like, oh, you're fine. And then I pulled up next to him. He said, no, Chief, we don't have any water. I said, oh, here, you take command. And he told me later, he said, hey, there's a lot of questions about this. And I said, did you tell him I screwed up? I can't tell him that. I said, well, yeah, you can. That's what happened. So when we did the after action, that's the first thing I said. That call was my fault. Here's why I did it. I'll stay out of your way.
And how powerful was that for that team to hear you say that?
Right. And it wasn't just our folks. Prescott Fire was on there as well.
Yeah, but the respect you get for that.
It's part of that. It's part of that humility. It's part of being vulnerable. And I think, and you guys do this all the time, I see you try new things. maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you try, you're not afraid to at least try it.
Yeah.
And make the adjustment. And so I try to follow that lead and do the same thing in CAFMA. Hey, look, it may not work, it may work, but if it works, we're way better off. If it doesn't, maybe we can adjust and still get to that goal.
I agree. I think one of the things I'm hearing as I listen to you that I think is a part of who we are as an organization is being a learning organization.
Right.
I think brings forward that humility, because you're putting yourself every week into a situation where I don't know what we're going to learn today. I'm right here with you. I read the last chapter just like you. Here's what I heard. What did you hear? So I think it helps bring forward that humility.
It does.
And that vulnerability, like we don't have all the answers. And I think what we're trying to do with this podcast is share with the community that we're trying.
Yeah.
And we're not perfect. I keep going back to like a zoning case. I get frustrated with community members, sometimes elected officials, and the media who tries to make that a divisive process. And really, if you think about the reason why do they have a zoning process put in place?
Sure.
It's to get community feedback. Here's what we'd like to do. What do you think? And that can be such a constructive process if people would come to those neighborhood meetings with, I see what you're doing. It's your land. You have the right to do something with it. Here's my thoughts. Sure. Did you think about this? And it could be so powerful and constructive. And you know, the last few that we've had hundreds of people show up, and there's 2 or 3 people that come in with really thoughtful ideas that we've actually incorporated into our design. And I just, what would it look like? I always think, what would it look like if our elected officials and the media all got together and said, this is a great process, come join it.
Right.
And the media reported, instead of saying 300 people showed up in opposition, they said 300 people showed up to give their input. What an amazing night. How would that change the mood in the whole community?
It does. And unfortunately, I think when you look at the media today, that doesn't sell. They want the controversy, and I don't. It's not unlike if the town manager and the council are doing their jobs, they're having their disagreements behind closed doors, and when they're going out in public, they are unified. And all of a sudden that becomes the town manager has the elected officials in their pocket. Well, how about there's a level of respect and values within the organization that they can sit down and have a dialogue and negotiate some agreement. And on your zoning case, I know, and this is where we have a great partnership and know each other well, Ron came to me and said, hey, there are a lot of people in the community saying that this particular project, the fire department can't handle it because you're already overworked. We do a lot with data in our organization. So I said, well, hey, I just got last month's numbers on my phone. Here it is. And I said, well, our reliability rating is this, our unit hour utilization is this, we have capacity. And so then when I went to the Prescott Valley Citizens Academy, I said, look, I understand some folks are not for development, but please do not use the fire department as a weapon against developers, because the developers will come ask us the question and we will provide them the data that may be contrary to what you're saying. So you might at least ask us before saying the fire department has an issue with this.
Well, one thing you touched on in that, and I think that it goes along with humility, is when you can have those private conversations and not put them in the public purview.
Yeah.
And it's not about hiding things from the public. It's, I look at our family and our family business, and my father before us, 50 years of working before the town of Prescott Valley was a town.
Right.
And through all the different mayors and town managers and elected officials, there's no way they agreed on everything over those 50 years. But what they did is when they disagreed, it was private.
Right.
And what that allows is you and I could have a private disagreement, but then we can put that aside and go to the next deal.
Yes.
But if we were to air our private disagreement out in the newspaper, then all of a sudden one of us might be like, well, shoot, he made me look really bad. I don't trust doing business with you anymore. And when Ron calls you up, you might be like, I don't know if we can serve you or not.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important part with that humility part is I think sometimes the public views it as we're hiding something, where we're actually just conveying a level of respect and humility and care for the other person so that we can do another deal in the future.
Sure.
We may not agree, but we know there's going to be another deal.
And how much is lost in the communication on a particular topic when you have all of this outside chatter, as opposed to the two people who don't agree sitting down and actually asking each other the questions and being respectful? Well, why do you feel that way about this? Well, let me provide you this information. Here's the details on it. And if more people could have more of those conversations, I think we get a lot more done as we're building the community we all want to live in. Because there's tremendous opportunity. Prescott Valley is a beautiful area. There's so many wonderful people here. In the time that my wife and I have lived here, we've met a lot of great folks that we get to sit down and share meals with. And I know that the Fain group, that's really your focus. And the time that I've worked with you all, that has been your focus. And I remember a project you and I worked on. I think you and Anessa called me. It was one of the apartment complexes. There was an issue, and you and I discussed it. And we went into the room with all the parties on the same page, and we got accomplished exactly what needed to be accomplished to get that project done.
Yep.
And that was because there wasn't a lot of chatter. It was, and you and I said to each other before we went in the room, we're going to control this dialogue so it doesn't get out of hand.
And that was the first big apartment project that we were building ourselves.
Right.
And so we ran into something we didn't know. Right. We hadn't done it before. We were learning. We called you and we said, we got to work this through. We don't know where we're going. And we're working a similar project with you guys right now because we're building another project that's bigger. It's 5 stories tall, and it has different fire concerns.
Absolutely.
Right? It has a parking structure. And so we're like, we got to figure this out. And we're not going in and telling you like, hey, we hired this consultant. They know what to do. Just listen to them. It's like, what do you guys think?
Well, and for our part, when we heard about the project and learned about it, I gave our prevention staff direction. I want you to go down to the valley, to areas that have similar type projects, and talk to their fire prevention folks about what it took to get through this project and provide the coverage that's needed to ensure the safety of everyone involved. And my focus, and I know your focus too, is don't just learn from within our organization. Get that global view. Go out somewhere else, gain information, bring it back. Go out and take a look at the processes we have, compare it to other processes, and come back and tell us either we're doing well, we need to tweak it, or we're really failing in this area and here's some ideas on how to fix it. But you don't learn that if you just stay in your own little silo. You have to go out and get that global view. And that's, I'm not just talking about in the state of Arizona. I mean, go out across the country. There's opportunity for training. And bring that back to our organization so we can learn from that.
And I think it's that approach and that willingness to learn that feeds into how we all have a role in the design of community.
Absolutely.
Because you could say we're fortunate. We're a young community in terms of communities. There's some communities that are hundreds of years old.
Right.
We're not. And so we have the advantage of going and studying them. What did they do well? Where did they make mistakes? And we can try to avoid some of their mistakes because we're young. And that should be to our advantage and not a disadvantage. But it takes that approach of willing to challenge yourself to get to the next level of design.
Right.
By going where you don't know what you don't know.
And believing in yourself and your organization's ability to accomplish and do good things. I'm pretty proud of the fact that the new Phoenix Fire Chief's a good friend, and he came up to sit on a panel in one of our training sessions. Always good to bring that outside perspective. And he took the time to look at our operations. I gave him a tour, and in the end he said, this is absolutely amazing. I had no idea that CAFMA had these resources and this type of operation. He said, what you have here is truly impressive to see. And for me, as the fire chief of CAFMA, to hear that from the big red machine out of the valley, Phoenix Fire, and a genuine compliment to our personnel, because one of the other things he said is, I noticed that every division that we went into, the people were smiling. And they talked about the wonderful things they get to do as part of their job. And I'm not just talking about firefighters, I'm talking about our warehouse manager, our facilities manager, our fleet manager. They were excited to show them what they get to do working with and for our organization. And I think that's the biggest compliment anybody could give us, is your people genuinely seem happy and excited to be here.
What a great culture. That's fundamental, right? You can't pay people to do that. They have to embody that inside them. That's what to me, that's like culture at its root.
And disclaimer, they didn't know we were coming. I did not pay them off ahead of time. So that's just who they are. And that's the type of environment that we want to create. And just like we discussed the apartment complex concerns that occurred, we work together on that because we have that relationship to say, hey, here's the concern I have, or here's the problem I'm running into. How can we work this out? And we're able to do that. And that's with any developer. Yeah. We work very well with Jason Giese and his folks, and Dorn Homes and their folks. We want to provide that level of customer service. The way I look at our agency is, we are not the driver of economic development, but if we're not careful, we can be the roadblock. And we don't want to be the roadblock. We want to ensure the safety of the community. We need to meet the intent of the code, but how do we work proactively with contractors and developers so they don't run into as many problems on their projects? And potential development that's looking to come to the area, and they look at it and say, wow, the fire department's not a pain here. They're willing to sit down and work with us. And that's where we want to be.
So let's build on that. We've talked a little bit about culture. We've talked about your passion for learning. So in our organization, we read the book One Thing, which is about setting goals fundamentally. And it's like, it goes something like, if you could only do one thing today, and you had to not do anything else today, and you would stay late, you would keep going until you got it complete, what's the one thing you need to get done today?
Okay.
And you can do that for a day, a week, a month, or a year. So we set it up for a year, and then every month, people have to set their one thing for the month.
Okay.
And every Wednesday, or the first Wednesday of every month, we check in on, how'd you do last month? And we play Battleship. It's either a hit or a miss.
Right.
And so the funny exercise about this is, when we first started it, people would come in with 2 or 3 things.
Okay.
And we'd be like, no, it's one. We tried to keep it simple.
Right.
We count to 1. And so surprisingly, that's a lot harder than you think, is because people are like, well, I got these 3 things I need to get done. But it's okay, boil it down. If you could only do one of those, which one would have to come to the top?
Right.
And so one of my goals, we've had a couple great years at Fain Signature Group. And so I was like, what do I do for 2022? And so my one thing for the year is to fundamentally transform how we do business.
Okay.
Now I wrote that and I'm like, but I don't know what it means yet.
Right.
Right? But that's my one thing. And so I want to talk to you about, like, so that's what's running in the back of my mind.
Okay.
And then you came into CAFMA and you started building this culture. You started bringing learning into it. You started this podcast to introduce, when you discovered, I always laugh, people don't like to read. Sometimes I think English is a second language for me and others, right? Because it's so fundamental, but yet it's the hardest thing, communication.
Sure.
So how are you working your organizational structure to be able to be that nimble organization that can work with developers, can work with municipalities, can work with other agencies? You have to interact with ambulance and police and sheriff. How are you working your organization so that you can be this big organization in our region, 369 square miles, but be small and nimble to respond to the different nuances that you experience every day.
I think it's a book that you have read as well, called The Talent War. Have you read that one yet?
I have not.
So The Talent War is about recruiting, hiring, and retaining the right talent. So one of our fundamental focuses is hiring and promoting the right people with the right character. I can teach you the job, but if you're not a good person, if you're not someone that can look at from a higher view and have a vision, then you're not somebody that we need, because I can't teach you that.
Mm-hmm.
So we really try to focus on hiring for character, and it's changed the way that we bring people into the organization. And what's funny is I started asking the value questions, and normally, for example, a firefighter interview, we have a panel, and the panel would ask more technical questions. The second interview process after that, I started developing the questions, and our HR manager said, no, the first panel already asked those. Because what they saw was, wait a minute, we want somebody that, we can teach them the technical stuff. We want somebody that fits the culture of the organization and can help it thrive.
Mm-hmm.
So we really focus on that hiring and promoting. And one of the areas that sometimes gets me in trouble in the fire service is, just because you score number one on the test doesn't mean I'm going to hire or promote you. If you're not the right person for that position, it's not no, it's not
mm-hmm.
yet. Here's where you're falling short to achieve this. You're not meeting our expectations. Here's how we can help you achieve that. And we have several cases that are great success stories, some that are not, but some that are great success stories from saying, it's not no, it's not yet. But I think that's the fundamental thing. We have to get the right people into the organization and then create that environment where they want to stay,
mm-hmm.
they want to grow, they want to engage in the community. Now, are we perfect? Absolutely not. Do we need more work in these areas? Absolutely we do. We are never going to arrive. It's a journey.
It is. I always tell everybody in our organization, I'm like, doctors and lawyers and engineers, in one respect, they have it really great because they get to practice medicine, practice law, and practice engineering. You put out fires, you're a firefighter, right. And we do business deals. Nowhere in there is we get to practice business.
Right.
But yet, that's what we all fundamentally are doing.
Yes.
I mean, you're learning on every fire you go to, every accident you respond to, you're learning something because the situation's different. And it's a mentality that I think is really hard to instill in an organization, to give them the confidence to know we're just practicing.
Right.
And with that comes mistakes.
And we try really hard to tell people, and it's in the compass, and it says the worst thing you can do is not make a decision.
Yep.
Because we can work through if the decision missed the mark. Mm-hmm. But if you just don't do something, well, now we have a bigger problem. Yeah. So make the call. And if you're following, we have hundreds of pages of policy and SOG. I will tell you that if you are following the 7 pages in the compass, it is unlikely that you are going to be operating outside the bounds that we've set. And so if you make a decision and it meets this, but it doesn't necessarily meet what the policy says, then maybe we need to evaluate the policy and see if that is written the right way for this organization. Or if this was, no, the policy's right, you made the decision based on this, in that situation, you were right to violate that policy.
Nice.
And
makes it really simple.
It does. That's
and in an industry
focus.
Where every second matters in making decisions, what a great way to boil it down to keep it simple for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's follow this. This is our compass, and that's why it's called that. This is our compass. If you follow this, you will be successful. I do have, if you don't mind, I do have some cultural concerns moving forward that we see it on the horizon. We just have to figure out how to address it. And that's where development comes in, because our organization had a residency policy, which we can't have anymore. And most of the people who work for us grew up in this community, somewhere close to the community, or came up through a reserve rank. With the housing market and trying to find people that want to serve communities anymore because we're just in a different time. We will end up hiring more people from outside of the area who don't know the culture and values of this community. Mm-hmm. And if they can't afford to live here, so they live an hour and a half away at a different community that has different culture and values, and they're commuting up here for the time that they're on shift, how do we get that engagement? How do we ensure that we don't lose that community connection and the culture that we're trying to build in the organization? I don't have an answer to that yet, but we are actively discussing that challenge because it's not going to be tomorrow. It may not be 5 years down the line, but 10 or 15 years down the line, we could be a completely different organization. We want to be that, but we want to keep heading in the right direction.
Well, and you layer in there a community that's growing rapidly.
Right.
And so a lot of people coming from other communities with different cultures are moving here.
Right.
There was something about our culture that attracted them.
Yes.
But when they get here, one of the automatics is let's start changing it. Because where I came from, that's what I always hear. Well, where I came from, we had this, and why don't we have that here? And it's like, well, we're different, right? We've been doing things differently. And I think it's a really big challenge for the community itself, because if we don't solve some fundamental concerns that are out there that allow young families to live here,
yes,
allow them to work and raise their children here, allow people in the prime of their career to be able to work here, whether it's in a service industry or not, to service those that are retired. We need them all.
Absolutely.
I mean, where I sit is like we need them all. We love our retirees. They bring a great fabric to the community, and they have so much experience and knowledge from their life they lived to share. And hopefully they're willing to share it with people.
Sure.
But then you have all, it's always been in our culture, because we're a family business, and we've been here for almost 150 years. We haven't wandered too far from home.
Right.
But we see the value of the next generation and bringing them up. And the next generation isn't just our family. The next generation is everybody's family. And we want the firemen to have families and have their kids be able to be raised here and want to live here and work, as well as everybody else. And the challenge we see is affordability and attainability. And if we don't start addressing it, and I don't see it as a public issue. In fact, the examples I've seen of public housing, I don't like.
No.
I think it's like communities have tried to solve this problem for hundreds of years.
Sure.
And there's some really bad examples of it that I don't think we want in Prescott Valley.
You're absolutely right.
But there's got to be a way we as a community, public and private, can come together to solve this problem. And part of it is just, in my world, it's simply economics.
Yes.
If we don't have enough supply, price goes up.
Yep.
If we choke the supply, price goes up. And what we're seeing, especially in Prescott, is you're seeing a lot of out-of-town buyers. They come in with all cash. And it's like, I was listening to a part of a 60 Minutes episode a couple weeks ago where they were interviewing the Wall Street investors that are buying up Middle America, the starter homes, right? And they're interviewing the families saying, we can't compete. We save up, we get 20% down, and an investor comes in and offers full price, waives appraisals, waives inspections, close in a week. It's like, how do I compete with that when I'm just starting out? And we don't have that per se here, but we have the rising prices coming because people from other communities can pay cash to move here, which is great.
Sure.
That is the American dream, to own your home outright and not have debt on it. But we also got to, with that, we got to take care of these other folks that are starting out that need the debt.
Even the rental properties, our folks are struggling to find available rentals and then affordable rentals. And we've actually run on calls up by the Kia dealership where they turn the hotel into apartments. In that area, our crew said, look, we went into an apartment, there were like 3 families living there. And they saw us looking around, they're like, look, we can't afford on our own to pay for a place to live. And the unfortunate thing of that is we have Walmart, we have Fry's, we have McDonald's and all of these other retail outlets, and we need people to work in there to serve the community. But there's no place for them to live. Yet we need those services. And you know, starting firefighters, police officers, nurses, teachers, in those industries as well. Yes, they start at a higher salary, still can't afford.
I think that's where people get lost in this conversation is when you say somebody can't afford a home, there's an image that comes in their mind, and everybody's is slightly different, but I don't think they visualize a firefighter. I don't think they visualize a nurse.
Right.
I don't think they visualize their favorite teacher that's teaching their kids.
Yeah.
I think they think it's somebody else that isn't important to their life, and it's not. I mean, it is even some doctors. You know, there's family practice doctors that don't make what a heart surgeon makes, and they're struggling to find affordable housing in our community. And it's a big problem. So I see that as well from a different perspective. But in our organizations, we've been trying to solve it. We've been trying to solve it for, I would say, intentional effort for the last 4 years of how do we go about doing this.
Well, and I want to mention something about Yavapai College and a program Chino's trying to work with them on, the town of Chino Valley. But what you said there just made a lot of sense, and it takes it back. I went through the Certified Public Manager program at ASU, and we really focused on the organization as one, right? Your organization as one. There's not any one person in this organization that's more important than the other, because if this person's not doing their job, this person can't do theirs, and so forth and so on. So if you work for CAFMA and you're in the warehouse, as far as I'm concerned, you're just as important as the firefighter getting on the engine, because they don't get on the engine and roll if they don't have all the supplies they need, if their hose hasn't been tested, if they don't have their medical equipment. And our warehouse folks are vital to the success of our organization. Well, now let's expand that and look at community. And you said people don't think about the firefighters and the people that are integral to their lives. But if you pull all the Walmart employees out and there's nobody to work there, well, now you don't have Walmart. So what are you going to do? And I think as a community, we need to start talking about our community as a whole, that everybody is important to the community. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status or where you are in life at this point in your life. No, you're important to here. And I heard something at an economic development breakfast, it was several years ago, and I won't say what organization it was from, but they were sitting up front on the dais as one of the presenters, and somebody brought up affordable housing. And this is a group that is supposed to be helping people. And the representative said, if they can't afford our homes, do we really want them living with us? And it was all I could do to bite my tongue and not come unglued, because I'm like, you're missing the point of community.
Yeah. We
are one. We should be.
And really you're missing the point of what I would say was the American dream.
Yeah.
Which is everybody has the equal opportunity to pursue their passion.
Yes.
And where they want to go. And some people fall short of where they'd like to be ultimately, but that's okay. I mean, that's what it's all about. The system to me works better when you have all the different levels and all the different people doing different things, because, thank God there's people that want to be firefighters. I don't know if I could do it, but I know there's fires that need to be put out and people that need to be taken care of.
Right.
And so we need all this that makes the fabric of our community. And we need to embrace people that want to do all the different roles.
Absolutely.
And, so it's a great topic you bring up, and we could probably spend months talking about it, and I don't know if we'd fix it.
No.
But it is something that as a community, we believe at Fain Signature Group, we need to bring it to the community and work together to solve it, because it's not, you can't tax it to make it right. You can't force a government housing. It's got to be something that works within the fabric of our community. And we as a community got to solve that.
Well, and just a project that Yavapai College is working on, so they have the 3D printing program, and they're looking at building some homes or apartments. They want to show how 3D printing can help build a community. And so the town of Chino Valley was talking to the folks at Yavapai College saying, well, if you have to build these things anyways as part of the program, why can't we build some housing for people trying to enter the market? It's a good joint public-private effort.
Yeah. No, I think it's fabulous, and we've talked to Yavapai College a little bit about it, trying to, is there a way we can work that angle as well?
Right.
And we're learning about what they're doing. I would say we're at the learning stage. And a little bit that we've learned is, now people, it's all based on the formula of the concrete, right? And how it goes together. And so because people are trying to figure it out, they don't necessarily want to share it, right? Because it's valuable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
So
I get it.
you got that issue,
Right.
And then now we compound inflation on everything, and so now we've got the inflation issue. But I think those programs are great, and we have to keep trying. I think another area that people, again, historically have a stigma about, but I think if they stopped and went and toured them, they'd be shocked, is manufactured homes.
Yes.
They
Absolutely.
are not. When I was little, the two things, apartments and manufactured homes, when I was a young kid versus today, night and day.
Completely different.
Today they are lifestyles.
Yes, absolutely.
When I was younger, they were like, that's what we can afford. That's it. All I can afford is to rent an apartment. But today, you go tour the projects that we built, and there's Jaguars, there's Teslas, and there's starter vehicles out there. They're all living together because it's a lifestyle for people. Some people just don't want to maintain a home, and they're like, I'd rather rent.
Yeah.
I lock my doors, I go to Phoenix, I play, I come back, and the yard's done. I don't have to worry about it.
It is.
And it is a lifestyle.
And people enjoy that part of it. But for younger families, even in the Phoenix area, those starter homes are out of reach. When you're paying $1,900 a month to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, my son graduated from NAU. He's a project estimator with McCarthy Construction. He does very well. And his fiance is a civil engineer, graduated from NAU. Together they do really well. $1,900 a month in rent. How do they put away for a house? And he said, Dad, it's $350,000, $400,000. I can afford the house, but if anything breaks, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of money. So when we talk about the American dream and you talk about the investors buying up all those starter homes, we're almost snatching that away from people. And
We are.
I mean, I'm all for free market. I'm all for capital investments and building things up. But when you're consciously and purposely degrading the American dream, that concerns me.
Yeah, the guy they were interviewing said, America can't afford the American dream, so we rent it to them. And I thought, what an arrogant statement.
Oh yeah.
And I hope we don't become that here, because that to me just really said who he was in so many ways that he may not even realize it. But that's what I don't want Prescott Valley to be. I think we can solve it, and I think it's going to take a lot of people trying to figure it out. We're going to make some mistakes along the way.
Well, and I think we have some great relationships. I sit on the Prescott Valley Economic Development Foundation board. It's amazing as a fire chief who's not a municipal chief to be invited to the table, even as an ex officio board member, to share with the group what we're doing, and then for the group to share with me what their needs are. It's great access when you're involved like that to understand, okay, here's your need, I can help meet that need for you. Let's sit down and have a conversation. Just like the other day, there's a new business moving to town, and I was in contact with them, and they said, we're looking for leased office space. And I said, well, I know exactly who to call. So I picked up the phone, I called Ron and Guy, and they called me back, and I got them with this individual, and I don't know where the conversation is now. That's not part of my business, but it was good to be able to connect them to someone in the community that can help. And when I talked to Ron, he said, well, if I don't have the right space, I'll help them find the right space to keep them here in Prescott Valley. That's an amazing partnership that I just don't know too many other communities share.
Yeah, it really is, because we are about the success of other businesses.
Yes.
Because we see that if they're successful, then new businesses looking in will see the success and they'll want to be here. But if a business fails, it doesn't matter where they're located, then the region, why'd they fail? Maybe we don't want to move our business there because they're not ready for our business. And so it is that collaborative spirit. And I guess if I were to sum up what we've been talking about today and put it in the context of design,
yes,
I see collaboration, open, honest dialogue,
yes,
and a lot of humility all go into design.
Absolutely it does. And honestly, I think this is a great topic that Marty should have at the chamber. And we can sit up and talk to the community about being one and working together in that collaborative spirit and having that humility and that vulnerability to sit up in front of a group and say, here's what we see. Here's the challenge. But on the other side of this challenge is opportunity if we're willing to take hold of the challenge and look for solutions.
Well said. Scott, thank you for
Brad,
coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time. It was a pleasure talking with you.
We'll have you back sometime maybe.
I would love to.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to our latest edition of Living a Good Life.